Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this joint roundtable discussion titled Environmental Security in the Indo-Pacific Collective Solutions for Sustainable Future. This event is co-hosted with USNA's Foundation India, and I'm Indu Saxena at the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers, the Chief Operation Officer and a Senior Fellow at the consortium. The Indo-Pacific region, encompassing the Indian Ocean and the Western and the Central Pacific Ocean, is in the grip of the climate crisis. The impact of the climate change are manifesting in various ways, from rising sea levels and ocean acidification to pollution, extreme weather events, and soaring temperatures. These challenges are not just environmental, they are socio-economic too. They are causing the displacement of populations, loss of livelihoods, and food insecurity. The situation is dire, and if left unaddressed, it presents an unprecedented existential threat to the region. As per the World Report, more than half of all South Asian countries are affected by one or more climate-related disasters. So, in this crucial topic, we have the star panels here. Let me allow to introduce them, and I will take the opportunity to introduce first Ms. Farah Kabir. She is the Country Director of Action Aid in Bangladesh. She has 20 years of vast experience in development and research. Her work is renowned in human rights, women's rights, workers' rights, climate change, and governance issues. She has participated in various deliberations at United Nations, regional, and national forums. She received the prestigious Nawab Ali Chaudhry National Award, the UN Saskawa Award for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Momentum for Change Lighthouse activity on climate change adaptation and disaster risk resilience in Bangladesh. She held a higher position with the British Council and Advocacy Institute in Washington, D.C. She has been a member of several professional societies, to name a few: Napier University, Edinburgh, Scotland, Climate Action Network South Asia, and International Institute for Environment and Development. Welcome, Sarah. We have Mr. Arpit Chaturvedi. He is the founder of the political risk management and policy advocacy firm Insight International. He is also the co-founder and chief executive officer of Global Policy Insights, a centrist think tank focused on governance, international political economy, international security studies, and sustainability. Based out of New Delhi, New York, and London, he is the chief strategy officer and co-founder of NVPOL, an environmental consultancy firm, and serves as the joint director of global policy, diplomacy, and sustainability fellowship. He graduated from Cornell University, USA. Next, we have the young and dynamic student and researcher Yoo Jung Kwon is a graduate student at Korea University, Seoul. Her research proposal on climate smart agriculture, building livelihood resilience for smallholder farmers, was selected at the Shanghai Symposium. She has represented various regional forums on CO2 reduction and has participated in the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network Youth Korea. She did the internship with the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers, and she penned a captivating piece for East Asia's path to carbon neutrality, which we proudly features on our website. You guys can have a look at this on our website. None other than we have Dr. Muhammad Aminul Karim. He's a retired Lieutenant General of the Bangladesh Army. He worked as chief of both the National Defense College and Defense Service Command and Staff College in Bangladesh. He was a visiting scholar at the Merchant Center of International Security Studies, Ohio State University, USA, and an adjunct professor at University of Malaya. He is an alumnus of the Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. NISA Center, National Defense University, USA, College of Defense Management, India, Malaysian Armed Staff College, and National Defense College, Bangladesh, and School of Air Defense Artillery, PRC. His research paper has been widely published in Referee Journal, and he will talk on his recent paper on blue economy. Next, we have Dr. Dhanashree Jairam. She's an assistant professor, Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, and coordinator, Center of Climate Studies, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Karnataka, India. She has worked on research projects in Germany, Netherlands, and Switzerland. Her primary fields of interest includes climate politics and diplomacy, environmental security and military, regional environmental policy in Asia, and environmental peace building. She is the author of Breaking Out of the Greenhouse, Indian Leadership in Times of Environmental Change, and Climate Diplomacy and Emerging Economies, India as a Case Study. Thank you all here. And let me announce it here that views presented here are personal, should not be constituted to any organizations and any affiliations. And please unmute yourself if you are not a speaker, and type your questions in the chat box. And this event is co-hosted with the USNAS Foundation India, and the USNAS Foundation's team is here. Mr. Abhinav Pandya and Ms. Anita and other members are also here. So thank you again for your time and participate in this event. And now I would like to invite Ms. Farah Kabir for her remarks. Farah, please.
Thank you, Indu. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. This is very important in terms of our global position and all that is happening across the globe. We spent a lot of time debating about environment and as environmental security and from climate security. And I think, as I was saying earlier to Indu, that we've at least come to some understanding that we need to look at it. Environmental security is also being threatened because of extreme climate and climate change. And now that climate crisis is a reality. Now, within this, in terms of the Indo-Pacific, which is the home to a very, very large population of the world, it covers South Asia, Southeast. We are looking at Vanuatu or Fiji, even. So it's a very big coverage, and it impacts on a huge number of population. So that is one thing we have to understand when we're talking about environmental security. Yes, it is about sea level rise, extreme weather events, which is challenging our food security, energy security. It's causing displacement. There are issues of loss of livelihood. I would say that there's loss of youth, there's loss of, childhood as well. And the threats come in not just economic dimension, or it's not about infrastructure. There's a huge social implication of this crisis. And unfortunately, when we're talking about the social dimensions, or when we are trying to be inclusive, we find that it is not. And that is because we are looking at a world which is extremely patriarchal. The institutions, the practices remain patriarchal, and inclusion of women, young people, gender minorities is still far from our aspiration. So that is one reality in which we are working. And when we talk about the crisis as a result of sea level rise and displacement, women and young people are challenged doubly. Their roles are challenged. They have to move. They're losing their social cohesion. And in all this, neither with their party especially when you are from the most vulnerable countries like Bangladesh, or you are from Fiji, or Maldives, or any part of the world, or in Africa, but they are at the receiving end, and therefore whatever action is being taken still remains not inclusive, because there's no integration of women or young people's voices, perspectives, or in climate governance at local or national level, or even at the global negotiations. In fact, at the global negotiation, it's quite stark how these negotiations lack the feminist perspective or women's participation. In numbers, now we see a lot more women and young people at the climate negotiation. Why is it important to have women's perspective and understanding of that of the indigenous? Because they're all being impacted differently. They have always been promoting nature-based solution. They have been talking about the social dimension. They have tried to look at, for if you come from the of deforestation, then you'll find it was the indigenous communities and the women who have always tried to protect their forests, have fought for that. If you look at water sources, it impacts on women and the gendered minorities and indigenous people on a different scale, because that's the source of livelihood, that's the source of water, and that is being threatened. These are the challenges that we find as if we are looking and doing research, and in the midst of this, we also have to understand that women have childcare responsibility. They have overall care responsibility. They have the responsibility for gathering water. They have responsibility for making sure of the health care of the family. Yet they have the least assets because of the inheritance laws, practices in different parts of the world. And intersectionality is a critical framework for us to understand the multifaceted nature of climate crisis, economic security. It cannot be discussed from the traditional perspective, but it has to bring in the intersectionality. We have to understand that there is environmental racism, there is disproportionate hazards are causing disproportionate impacts on where you are located and what resources you have. If you are from a low income or from the south, if you're from Bangladesh, which emits almost at a minimal nominal level, yet it's being impacted on a higher level. So feminist approaches put the discussion on a wider perspective. It talks about the patriarchy, it's talking about debt and tax, because it's important for climate justice, finding the nexus of climate and gender alternative to the extractive obsession of economic growth, fossil fuel dependency. We need to come out of this and look at gendered and green alternatives. I will stop there. I'm very happy to talk about how ActionAid Bangladesh has, in the last 10, 15 years, been in the forefront of this, how we have managed to both do activism and policy advocacy, work with the government, influence the government. Bangladesh now celebrates of being a champion in early warning and disaster management. If you go deep into it, you will find the role of non-government organizations, the role of ActionAid in policy and legislative advocacy. We have taken the issue of climate justice at global level through our politicians, our prime minister. Again, behind all that, you will find the contributions of national organizations, NGOs, academics, the loss and damage discourse, the loss and damage fund. Behind that, you have individuals like Professor Salimul Haq and all of us. So I think that is something that I can elaborate on. In terms of action, I would say that we need a strong youth and women's perspective and voice in it. We have to think about gender responsive climate finance. We need to invest in health. We need to invest in SRHR if we are talking about justice, because when the salinity rise, it is impacting on the SRHR of women and young women and so on. So with that, I will stop here. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Farah. Yeah, rightly said that the global negotiation on feminist perspective, and it has been 25 years that the first 178 countries met in Rio de Janeiro. And after that, the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, and definitely we need more work or walk the talk in this global negotiations. More stakeholders needs to come, and we will happy to talk more about this later in the Q&A session. And now I would like to invite Mr. Arpit Chaturvedi for his remarks. Arpit, over to you.
Thank you, Indu. So I'm going to talk about very practical stuff over here. We have across the years come across so many righteous sounding solutions to environmental policy. I run a fellowship program called the Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowship Program. And I do hear a lot of people talking about environment and how do we solve the problem, etc., etc. And I feel that most of the focus in the world is towards approaches which have not worked or which are simply preachy or which are not going to work. Take, for example, I mean, one of my favorites is the Earth Overshoot Day. Right. So every year there's this organization called Geneva Environment Network that publishes a report called Earth Overshoot Day. I'm not saying that these reports are not coming from a good place. These are very well intentioned. But what they do is that they talk about an idealism which which does less benefit and probably more harm than it's intended for. So let me tell you very quickly what this Earth Overshoot Day does. Every year, so for example, last year, 2023, the Earth Overshoot Day was August 2, which means that the given resources that the Earth has on August 2, the given resources that the Earth has for the whole of the year, they run out on August 2. So on August 2 deadline, Earth has consumed as many resources as it can, and it cannot generate any new resources beyond that. But the whole year runs until the end of December, which means that from August to December, we are literally consuming resources from the future, and those resources will never be replenished in the world. Okay. Now, typically, Earth Overshoot Day gets a lot of coverage in Time magazine, etc., etc. But if you critically look at it, it game theoretically triggers a backward induction prisoner's dilemma sort of a problem that if, think about it this way, if I'm in 2049 and predictions say that climate crisis will, you read a lot of this news that by 2050 we will reach a point of no return, etc., etc. Now, if I'm in 2049 and if I see that all of the other players in the world have exploited the Earth ecosystem so much that we will not be able to have a sustainable environment by after 2050. If I'm not expecting that to happen in 2050, and if I'm not expecting other players to do any good in 2050, I am not going to do any good in 2049. And if you are a player in 2048, then you will think that others are not going to do anything in 2049 and 2050, so I should not do anything in 2048, and so on and so forth. If you come back to today, you will not do anything today because you already think that the situation is hopeless. So a lot of the media and communications that we see around the fact, this catastrophic thing that we have already lost the battle, we have already lost the war, that disincentivizes people to take action. So I think that some of the well-intentioned communication around climate change needs to change, first of all. Secondly, some of the ancient techniques have also not worked if you critically analyze that. Those ancient techniques is personification of the climate. In fact, I had a friend who did her PhD on how rivers have been given rights of persons in New Zealand, even in India, etc. But that has not really helped the cause of climate change. In India, we have considered River Yamuna and River Ganga divine. And we considered them divine because those were sources on which life depended in the northern plains. So we called Ganga as Ganga Mata, etc., etc. But what have we done to these rivers? We have really polluted them to a level where they are at a point of no return. uh, so which also goes on to show that the personification of these rivers, maybe you could also argue that the reason why all of that cleaning effort for Ganga and Yamuna is also taking place because we personified it. But despite the fact that we called it as a mother, we still polluted it enough. So the idea over here is that some of these very well-intentioned strategies, modern and ancient, have not worked. The question is that what will work? And my analysis of what will work is the following. Number one is that we need to first prepare for adaptation. Now we have come at a time where all of those long-term mitigation planning, etc., is very important. But once we are able to assure people that we have enough technology, enough money, enough resources, and enough planning to be able to meet the climate threat immediately, then we will communicate a sense of safety and security amongst the people and remove the anxiety. It is a cause for being anxious. I'm not saying that we don't have cause for being anxious, but first, if we are able to create that sort of a buffer where we can assure world populations that we will ensure that you will not die, let's first focus on that immediate problem, because the long term stuff we have for a long time we've discussed it over and over and over again. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that for too long this discussion has happened in the global south, that the global north or the west is not giving us enough money for mitigation. And if you are looking at things game theoretically, you would always know that if the west has money, they would have little incentive to give money to the east or to the south, and by the time they'll wake up it'll be too late. And if you're the east or the south, you would only get stuck in the game of asking for those resources from the west and getting very little in return. And we have been playing this game for far too long now. The thing is, what is the way out of it? The way out of it is innovation. The way out of it is that the global south and countries like Fiji, etc., I know that now they're using uh, a lot of these innovative adaptation techniques, but also innovative finance techniques, such as uh, getting adaptation funded by crypto, etc. So those are some of the innovative financial tools that countries that are affected by climate change will need to take. So innovation would play a big role. Technology and adaptation focus would take a big role. And third is focusing on things that are more immediately visible. Human mind just works like that, that things which are more immediately visible get solved first. So for example, things such as pollution, which is something that people can see very clearly in front of their eyes, as opposed to talking to them about Earth Overshoot Day. Or my favorite is biodiversity, which I think is very important, but people don't talk about it enough. And people would not talk about it because people are caught up in their daily lives and immediate stuff is required. So focusing on some of those immediate issues. And lastly, which is good news, which I think most governments are doing now, looking at how industries can be regulated and coming up with reporting norms. So, for example, in India, we've got now this BRSR reporting, so business reporting and business responsibility and sustainability reporting, etc., for the top 1,000 firms listed on the stock exchange. Some of these things that are, starting with where the source of the pollution is. Most of the pollution is caused by the private sector in the world. So if the private sector begins to report, and there's regulation that demands them to report, those are some very good steps. So we have, after many years of research, etc., figured out something, but we have a long way to go. I'm going to stop here.
Thanks, Arpit, for your remarks. Yeah, definitely we will take some policy suggestions in the QA and in the last, in the conclusion phase. Now I would like to invite Yuzheng. Yuzheng, please, over to you. And apologies, like in odd hours. I know that in Seoul it's 10 p.m., right? So please go ahead.
I actually prepared a PPT, so I'll just quickly make it brief as possible, though. Hi, everyone. So I'd like to discuss about the East Asia's carbon neutrality progress. I'll just actually skip the introduction. So far as we know, China, Japan, and Korea have actually taken a very ambitious route on the carbon neutrality progress. However, as we see here on the slide, they actually are highly insufficient in regards to their progress on reaching carbon neutrality in terms of their policies, action, the NDC climate finance. And that's why in my commentary, I've highlighted what is going on with the regional corporation, how far they are, what is the status quo, and that is what I'll be also briefly covering today. So, in 2010, actually, the China, Japan, and Korea, they adopted the vision by the trilateral corporation vision, recognizing that climate change is a top tier for corporate agendas, and one of the agendas were corporation sustainable development and environmental protection. And a year later, they established a trilateral corporation secretariat, which is located here in Seoul, Korea. And since the announcement declaration of the carbon neutrality in 2020, the three countries have established a forum on carbon neutrality goals, and it was actually quite successful. And early March this year, they've actually launched their third forum on the carbon neutrality goals. And the third forum discussed about digital innovation and just transition, and they also invited high-level government officials and experts and international organizations to discuss on the ways on how to progress forward as a key leader on regional cooperation into achieving carbon neutrality. And actually, China, Japan, and Korea, they have a long history in regards to this trilateral corporation. One of the oldest and one of the most institutionalized consultative mechanism is actually the tripartite environment ministers meeting. And this annual meeting has been held since 1999. And the main aim was to promote and lead regional environmental management, where the successful completion of the tripartite joint action plan led to the second joint action plan, and now we're on to the third joint action plan from 2021 to 2025. And in 2015, actually, during the 6th Trilateral Summit, they adopted the Joint Statement of Environmental Cooperation, which highlighted 8 priority areas to strengthen cooperation. This included biodiversity, air quality, and climate change. And the reason that the recent tripartite environment ministers meeting that was held was last November, and they discussed a wide range of issues on their achievement, the outcome, the progress on the environmental management. And this covered pollution control, biodiversity conservation, climate change, environmental education, environmental awareness and public participation, environmental industries and technologies. And furthermore, the Tripartite Plus X Corporation continues to explore possible areas of cooperation in supporting the accelerated implementation of the SDGs as well. And This is what I really want to highlight as well, because carbon neutrality, as we say, it continues to emphasize that this is a systematic transition that we're talking about, and we continue to highlight inclusive and just transition as well. And so local governments have actually been taking on quite an important role in progressing on carbon neutrality at the city level as well. As we know that urbanization is a critical issue that we talk about on how to make sure it is sustainable and helping to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change. And one of the workings that have been done is WeGo, which is World E-Government Organization. The headquarters is actually located in Seoul as well. They've been working with Trilateral Corporation Secretariat to jointly establish a smart city corporation platform. And in 2020, they organized a webinar on the CJK Smart Cities. And this was like the first step in fostering a corporation platform. And moreover, they've further agreed to extend this TCS culture exchange program for government officials, inviting them for smart city site visits, knowledge sharing sessions for CGK practitioners, initiating partnerships in smart city and sustainable development. And not only that, but last year, the local governments, they declared a kind of a ambition, I guess, or kind of setting forward on their leadership role on ensuring that local governments also play a really important role in sustaining this sustainable city development issue as well. It's nearly 5 minutes too, but let me just quickly wrap up then. And also furthermore, there has been a joint research project on cities towards decarbonization and sustainable development, where in 2019, they released a publication on good practices toward decarbonization and sustainability, where they continue to jointly work with cities in sharing best practices and case studies to help officers and associated practitioners in the Asian Pacific cities as well. So this is I'll just cover this and I'll end it. But once again, I also wanted to highlight about youth engagement, where a lot of as we know, continuous emphasis on youth engagement has been happening. And within the TCS as well, they've actually newly organized, and also further, there are existing youth programs within the TCS as well. And they don't only merely just focus on environmental cooperation, but they kind of focus on the whole bigger aspect of regional cooperation. And they have continued to strengthen the topic on environmental cooperation as well. And WeGo as well, they've also kind of set forth a new initiative for youth, organizing activities to conduct and raising awareness of smart city development for young people from CGK, partnering with Campus Asia, which I have also actually participated in. And so I think we can further discuss it during the Q&A session, but I will end my part here. But yeah, thank you. It's already 6 minutes. I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the very interesting presentation, Yujung. And we look forward to the questions. And now I would like to invite Dr. Aminul Karim. General Karim, over to you, please.
Yeah, I got some slides. I'll just go through that. Hopefully I can get it.
Yeah, sure. Please.
Is it okay? I don't know.
So you just displayed on the
Yeah,
Zoom.
I got it.
Yeah, got it.
I got it. Yeah, I'll be basically talking on my paper that is being published by Spring and Nature. Yeah, as a chapter. The title is Smart Governance for a Sustainable Blue Economy, the case of the Bay of Bengal. And then I'll definitely link up with the environmental security of Indo-Pacific. Yeah. I'll basically talking about the blue economy, and then I talk about sustainability, and there are three parameters: economic, environmental, and social equity. And we talk mostly about the health of the ocean. And economy return on investment on blue economy is much higher than the normal economy. And then I'll talk about the governance, about a set of regulations, treaties, policies, institutions, and so on and so forth. The most important document that we have in the world today is the UNCLOS, and it deals with the EEZ. And UNCLOS is the fundamental international legal governance framework. And there is the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, the Commission of the Limits of the Continental Shelf, and then Seabed Authority. Now, I have a I would like to draw your attention to this point. It's called Planetary Boundaries. A famous author, Strom, he has written in a famous journal, the Nature. Nature is a very important journal, one of the best in the world. He says, Earth, if you take it as a system, then it is getting, we are crossing the boundary, 12 of them. And then he's saying that climate change, the rate of biodiversity loss, and interference with the nitrogen cycle are already transgressing the boundaries. And this is true for Bay of Bengal, and this is true for Indian Ocean, and also beyond, and this is true for the East Asia as well. Now, I will show you the Bay of Bengal, how it is positioned in the great game of the Indo-Pacific. You see, there are 12 ports, starting from Hambantota, Colombo, Chennai, Visakhapatnam, Calcutta, Paira, Matarbari, and so on, and Penang up to Malaysia. These 12 ports are well positioned to control or to have its say or its impact on Indo-Pacific region. Okay. Then I talk about the Indian Ocean. It's very important. It's part of the Indo-Pacific region. And, world's trade in oil, 50% of the, 2/3 of the trade on oil, 50% of the world's container traffic, 1/3 of the bulk cargo, and about 100,000 ships per year transit through the Indian Ocean. And that's very critical. And it is going from Persian Gulf to Taiwan and South Korea and Japan and so on and so forth. Indian Ocean is called the maritime regionalism. Then Bay of Bengal is called the maritime frontiers for Bangladesh or for Myanmar or for Eastern India. The Bay of Bengal has a large marine ecosystem, and the 60% of the area within the EEZs are within the EEZs of the countries such as Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Maldives, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. Now look at the EEZ of the countries. Like Sri Lanka has, these are all settled. These matters are settled. The EEZ of Sri Lanka is settled. EEZ for Eastern India is settled. EEZ for Bangladesh is settled. There was an arbitration in the international court between Myanmar and Bangladesh, and between Bangladesh and India, and these have been all resolved. So that's a good point. In the Indian EEZ on the eastern side as well, the Nicobar Island area. And then there is a bad news in the Bay of Bengal, as there's a dead zone coming up, which is having an area of 60,000 square kilometers. It's almost the area of Bangladesh. And dead zone is very, very serious for a country like Bangladesh. We are looking for a blue economy. And if the blue economy is harmed by the dead zone, because oxygen level is going down. Oxygen level of that part of the sea is going down, and this is going to create big problem for Bangladesh. Or it might even move to Arabian Sea as well. Now, dead zone, we have about 6,000, I said, told you about that. And then Bay has minimal presence of oxygen. That's very disturbing, disconcerting, so to say. Now, acidification is increasing in the Bay of Bengal. There is 26% increase in the acidification of oceans all over the world. And that is very damaging for the Bay of Bengal. But fisheries, we have a lot of fisheries area in the Bay of Bengal. Hillsides, but the hillside is depleting. That's a bad side of it. Because of overfishing, foreign intruders, Bangladesh Coast Guard is trying to guard this area, but there are illegal, unlawful, unrelated IWW fishing, and this is a governance challenge for the blue economy. Oil and gas is coming up. Myanmar has got it. Bangladesh has floated the international tender. We are expecting good response this time. PSC, production sharing contract is being finalized and it has been improved. Now there's uncertainty about getting oil in the Bay of Bengal, but Bangladesh has floated the international trade, and these are the zones. We have got, in Sanggu we have got gas, in Kutub we have got gas, and 16 of the other things are onshore and 2 are on the offshore. Okay. Renewable is Bangladesh is doing very bad because we are contributing only 1.5% to the energy resources of Bangladesh, but the world average is 1/7 of the world average. 1/7 of the energy requirement of the world is made by the renewables, and Germany is one of the highest. It is getting 30% from the renewables. International trade routes are coming out from Bay of Bengal for Bangladesh. As I said, one is going towards the Southeast Asia, and the other is going to the Persian Gulf via Sri Lanka and India. So this is a vital national security interest for Bangladesh, and I think this is a big challenge for Bangladesh, security challenge for Bangladesh. Now there's plastic pollution coming in the Bay of Bengal. This is coming from Southeast Asia mainly. 80% of it are coming from Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. So there's lack of governance over here. We have to strengthen the governance part of controlling this pollution in the Bay of Bengal. And then our mangrove forest, the largest mangrove forest in the world, the Sundarban, is dying. There is huge siltation, paucity of sweet waters, intrusion of saline water from the bay. Sundari trees, the lifeline of the Sundarban is dying because there is paucity of sweet water. The cyclone and tidal force are increasing. There was a huge cyclone in 1970 where 1 million people just got evaporated in one night. There was one in 91 and 2007. In 2007, I was involved in the relief and rehabilitation campaign or the operation of those cyclones. Also 2007, I was personally involved in that. And over the next last 90 to 2004, the frequency of storm, flood, and extreme temperatures are higher in and around Bangladesh. That has to be studied maybe because of the sea level rise. Now there are transboundary rivers in Bangladesh between China, Bhutan, Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. Now there is an United Nations Convention on the Law of the Non-Navigational Uses of International Water Courses. This is part of the governance, and it is saying that you must ensure equitable utilization of the waters of transboundary rivers. But this is not a binding mechanism, and this is a limitation that we have, and India probably doesn't care much about that. And Bangladesh is deprived of the lawful and legal, or whatever you say, legitimate water sharing. And I'll just give you a gift from India. This is a river, a big river in the north of Bangladesh. Now, this picture was taken last week, and see the river bed. Our boys are playing cricket on the river. But when the monsoon starts, the water will come, hopefully. During this July, September, it will be full of water. No, not to worry about that. But now it is going dry, except the 4 major rivers. Okay. Now I'm trying to link it up with the Sustainable Development Goal. I have taken only SDG 14 and SDG 13. The life below water is SDG 14, and climate change deals with SDG 13. Now, climate change is giving rise to heat waves, droughts, floods, and tropical cyclones. Now, I think Arpita Chaturvedi has talked about the global warming. I'll not talk about that. I think I'm not the person to talk about on that. It is there. The problem is there. It's a big challenge for us. Okay. Paris Agreement is legally binding on climate change, but I don't know how many people are following that. The good news is there was an Iowa Indian Ocean Region Rim Association conference in Dhaka in 2019, and there was called Dhaka Declaration, which incorporated ideas, principles, and norms of the blue economy. It called for balanced approach between conservation and development of blue economy. There are 6 pillars they have identified: fisheries and aquaculture, renewable ocean energy, seaports and shipping, offshore hydrocarbons and seabed minerals, marine biotechnology, research and development. Things are moving in that direction. I think there's some research going on in Bangladesh. There's some university institutes coming up, and there's a good job being done by our researchers. BIMSTEC has come up, but not that effective. ASEAN countries have a declaration on blue economy. They have identified fisheries, aquaculture, marine transport, renewable energy, tourism. I think ASEAN and Indian Ocean are almost similar. Now, the South China Sea remains problematic. that you know about that. There's a claim from 6-7 different countries. China is asking for 90% of the South China Sea. There was arbitration in the international court between China and the Philippines, and the verdict went in favor of Philippines, because the Americans want free, open, and uninterrupted passage through all the maritime routes in the Indo-Pacific, and there's a problem on that. So UNCLOS ratification, America has not done it, and China doesn't care about it. So there's a problem. Now, Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lankan constitutions have made it a fundamental duty of the state that we will encourage blue economy. All these three constitutions from Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka are saying that we will encourage sustaining blue economy is our next frontier. Otherwise, we cannot feed our people. Simple as that. So Bangladesh has enacted the Territorial Water and Maritime Zones 74. It has been amended in 2021. Bangladesh has got a blue economy cell, but I would say it's not that effective. Now, there are 3 cases I would like to bring to your knowledge. Is the Moheshkhali Island is one of the islands in the Bay of Bengal. This can be developed as a model island where you can have all sort of things like water, pure water, aquaculture, then calcifier culture, then renewable energy, so on and so forth. And this can be taken as a model case, then it can be then expanded to other islands. We have a lot of islands in the nearer part of the Bay of Bengal belonging to Bangladesh. Now, an Indian author, she's Chaturvedi. She's also Chaturvedi, some Chaturvedi. She's from Observer Research Foundation. She's suggesting that how about having a center under IORA? It is called Bay of Bengal Association Research Center, something like that. She's calling that polycentric quasi-government type organization, which can undertake different projects and do research and then feed it to the different countries. That's a good idea, no doubt. And then a Bangladeshi expert is talking about, how about having a separate ministry for the marine affairs? That's a little bureaucratic. Bangladesh bureaucracy is generally generalist bureaucracy. We have to have more professionals there to make it more functional. Well, if your top is too heavy, things may not work that way. Now, I've only talked about that. The EEZs have been sorted out between Bangladesh, India, and Myanmar. Climate migration is a big problem for Bangladesh. These are huge in Dhaka and Chittagong city. About 50,000 people per square kilometer live in the Dhaka city, which is almost double the density of Manhattan in New York. This is difficult to tame because there's poverty, both poverty below the poverty line and the hardcore poverty are increasing. Shanties are, increasing. Public health is suffering. Bangladesh is one of the densest countries in the world, and it is giving rise to pollution. And Bangladesh Dhaka is one of the most polluted cities in the world. Genocide migration, I would call that. Rohingya refugees are being sheltered in Bangladesh. More than 1 million of them. It is difficult to maintain them. They're destroying our environment, including our wild elephants are being destroyed. Market system is distorted. America is giving us good help in terms of monetary support. UN is doing a good job, but how long can you feed them in a small space like Bangladesh? Human rights is affected because of this climate change in Bangladesh. I would tend to say that the lower order needs to higher order needs. Right to decent living is a right of everybody. Right to clean drinking water is a right of everybody. Right to gender justice is a right to everybody, all women and men. But there's a good news. The Bangladesh Supreme Court has given a landmark decision in 2019 to grant legal entity to the Turak River, the rivers around Dhaka city. There are 3 rivers, and it expands to it covers all the rivers of Bangladesh. They'll be treated as a legal entity. So if you are destroying the river, the court can impose an injunction and stop that destruction of the river. The court has come forward, but how the government is going to deal with that is a big question. Gender justice is a big problem for Bangladesh or for Africa or for any other country. And I would tend to suggest that we should have training courses for both men and women. It can cover areas like rainwater harvesting, community-based water management, develop water efficient policies, and so on and so forth. So climate migration is a big challenge for Bangladesh. Genocide migration is a big challenge for Bangladesh. Human rights are being violated in Bangladesh. And gender justice is, of course, definitely violated. With that, I think I'll end. I would like to thank all of you participants, and especially Dr. Indu Saxena. And with that, I say goodbye. Thank you. How do I get out from here? Or stop share? Huh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karim, for that enriching presentation, and hopefully we will do the next event on the Bay of Bengal, the climate security and climate change in the Bay of Bengal. That's a you have the content of one webinar, one event only itself, and surely we will divide it in the region in South Asia and Southeast Asia and the East Asia, and that covering the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Dr. Dhanashree Jairam, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Indu. And thank you for inviting me to this webinar. So a lot has already been said by the previous speaker, so I don't want to repeat any of that. And I also suppose, I would keep it very short so that we have some time for Q&A and discussion hereafter. When we talk about environmental security or climate security in the Indo-Pacific, of course, we have varied geographies, different states at different levels of economic development in the region. We also have, different communities that are disproportionately affected by climate and other environmental vagaries, which is something that the previous speakers also mentioned. So in that kind of a region, you need like a multifaceted approach, multi-stakeholder approach, and something that involves different stakeholders and different right holders, as one would like to put it, to reach at collaborative solutions to climate and other environmental challenges. To first of all say that, so when we look at climate or environmental challenges, and I think we need to understand them through this lens of idea of comprehensive security, right? So something that impinges on all securities today. So whether it's human security, non-traditional security, whichever way you want to call it, we know that this is a systemic crisis that we are looking at. Climate or environmental issues, they impinge on economic security, by affecting livelihoods, and also affecting GDP, for instance. In many cases, we have data that clearly shows that the economic losses and damages caused by disasters have, in fact, also eroded some of the development gains made by developing and least developed countries in the region of the Indo-Pacific. And we know that Asia-Pacific is one of the most climate vulnerable and disaster-prone regions of the world. The second part is also about, the third order impacts, as so when we say about environmental vulnerabilities, there is, of course, first order impacts like temperature rise or glacial melting or land use change. We also have the second order impacts of how it affects livelihoods or how it affects migratory patterns, which we are also seeing in many places. Bangladesh was mentioned earlier, but also many other countries are also affected by by post displacement due to disasters and climate related disasters or other sorts of disasters, but also how drought, for instance, can take away livelihoods of farmers, and that pushes many communities to move to urban settings where, again, the precarity is very extreme. Because today, when we are saying like adaptation is the key, but how far can adaptation really resolve all the challenges that we have? Because if you look at the heat waves that have affected all of South Asia and Southeast Asia, we've seen record temperatures all over Asia this year. And we know that this scenario is just going to get worse. How far you can adapt to this heat waves and, rising temperatures is a big question mark. So in the end, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, should still be a big priority, especially for the high emitters in the global north. That is without going, without saying the climate justice aspect is extremely important to these discussions. The third order impact is something that is very critical, particularly when we are talking about the systemic nature of the crisis, right? This is something that has legal implications, which was also talked about. For example, if you look at climate migration, it's still not recognized within international law. We don't have a term called climate refugee in international law, although it may be used fashionably or, as something that to talk about migration that may be induced by climate change. We also are still understanding the impacts and the risks that climate and other environmental challenges pose to, for instance, global supply chains. We know that in the past, disasters have, in fact, disrupted the supply chains. I mean, of course, COVID-19 is possibly the biggest example of that as a major pandemic, which did, disrupt the supply chains massively. But even if you look at environmental disasters, have had such impacts. The tsunami that happened in Japan, the Fukushima disaster was one of them. The Thailand floods in 2011 is another example. So the big manufacturing and innovation centers, when they are affected by climate and environmental change, they have like this ripple effects on the entire supply chain. The third aspect is also about energy transition. So today we are talking about solutions for energy transition. And of course, investments in renewable energy and countries instituting policies for energy transition has picked up a lot of momentum in the recent past. But it has its own financial risks. It has its own justice-related risks, particularly for communities that have been dependent on the fossil fuel sector for a long time. We also have questions of, for instance, where will the critical minerals come from? Because even today, we know that the majority of the critical minerals processing and the raw materials do come from China. So that dependence is something that is, from a geopolitical perspective, this is something that is also being addressed by forums like the Quad. And, everyone's talking about diversification, which also has huge ramifications for this energy transition that we are talking about. Amidst this, of course, we have cooperation that is something that is also gaining a lot more momentum. We have, for instance, military to military cooperation, like through the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. It's one such example where, HADR, the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief exercises have increased in number. So there is more interest among the militaries of the region to gain that sort of, knowledge from each other, share knowledge, understanding, interoperability, and having, a sort of common standard operating procedures that would also help militaries to tackle these disasters faster on a more urgent basis, right? So this is something that is gaining momentum. There is also like some level of cooperation happening through some of the regional organizations in the region. For example, the Pacific Islands Forum is one of the leading sort of, organizations which has put forth many regional frameworks and is also working with other major players in the region to try and reach collaborative solutions. But also you have ASEAN, for instance, BIMSTEC. So many others are looking at solutions. But of course, much of these initiatives also require a lot of finance and capacity building, which is very, critical. So if, the capacity building particularly is something that all the countries, particularly the developing countries in the region, need to focus on more if they want to also, something that can be done collaboratively through, different sub-regional organizations and regional organizations for a better preparedness and better also, transition that we are talking about, the transformation part that we are all talking about, but it requires a massive overhaul of the systems that we have put in place today. So in that sense, security or environmental security in the region or in this Indo-Pacific, as we call it, requires all the different nodes to come together, which of course there are many challenges. I'm not saying, this can happen overnight, but there are also many positive changes like community-led climate action. There are also, as I said, many forums that are coming up with frameworks that could help steer some of these, climate initiatives forward, or innovative climate finance solutions. Technology is something that is being focused on as well, especially in the energy sector. So all these actions need to come together if we have to, think of a more cohesive and collaborative approach to environmental security in the Indo-Pacific. So I'll stop there, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Dhanashree, and it's great to hear you all. Let's jump into the QA session because we have less time for this session. Hopefully, we have to take another round of this discussion very soon. My first question is to Farah. I want to, it's very intriguing to us, like all of us, hopefully, the women perspective or feminist lens, while we were talking about the Bay of Bengal and the Bangladesh. Being a women prime minister for so long years, and I know that both parties had the women had there, either party comes in the power. So how do you see that, like Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change? I'm reading the BBC quote. The government estimates that by 250, one in every 7 Bangladeshi will be displaced due to climate change. That's the BBC report says. So what are the challenges to bring the women or the feminist lens in perspective to inclusion, to be a stakeholder? And I want to hear it from you, because you have been long in these discussion in the international fora. Please.
Well, I think that's a very standard question. People say you have a woman prime minister, but that's the PM's job has its own JD, and it comes with a lot of I'm sure requirements. But what is important is that Bangladesh is a delta, and it is vulnerable to sea level rising. It has repeated cyclones. It's got drought because we have had very little rain. So the climate change has impacted us on every front. And this is the same country that has been working on building resilience. It has taken up so many initiatives for adaptation. And we work on the ground with community, and there's numerous examples of where community adaptation has taken place. We are an example on disaster preparedness, disaster management. When we have major disasters at this in the last 5 years, there's hardly a loss of life. There are, but very, 1 or 2, and every life lost is a tragedy. We are managing in terms of moving the people. We're trying to save our resources. But, we also have to acknowledge that we cannot go on adapting. Well, the developed countries are happily following the development paradigm they have been. They are totally dependent on fossil fuel and the traditional, energy sectors. So you are asking the rest of the world, the most vulnerable countries, to adapt. They are. We have developed a national adaptation plan. This is a country which has, not only national adaptation plan, it's national determinant commitment, but it has a 100-year prosperity plan. It's working on a delta plan. So that is that we have in getting our government to take those action. That was the influence, and that's where women's perspective is being highlighted. It's still a long way to go. Just 3 days ago, the Dhaka city, which has a population of 12 million residing, and if you add those who come and go, it's over 20 million. So it's a huge population in one team. We trust, but it's still a challenge to bring women's perspective, young people's dimension on it. And displacement is not something that is going to happen in 2050. Believe me, it's already happened. It's happening. I work with the communities who have had to leave because of either extreme weather, river erosion, or because of salinity. We've just finished a research on the impact of the climate change on health in coastal areas. So the requirements and the adaptability, the agility and flexibility is on a very different level. But there's a limit, because unless all our other actors who are contributing towards emission, to fossil fuel dependency, we get $6.1 trillion as subsidies for fossil fuel industry. And you can't put a loss and damage fund to a billion. You still haven't got the 100 billion for the adaptation. So you can see what the geopolitics is about. You can see how different leadership, every time we go to the climate negotiation, we can't talk about compensation, attribution. It becomes a tussle and a push and pull thing between China and America. The American can decide to walk away from climate treaty when it likes. It can decide to come back when it does. So the accountability, transparency, these are all huge concerns. So this is where the feminist lens is important, because it talks about accountability, it talks about debt, it talks about the colonization needs to go and decolonization of aid, the mindset, the patriarchal, I guess this is where if we all come together, we can define and discuss security from human dimension, along with, of course, the environment, biodiversity loss. None of us is safe unless we all work together in this.
Thank you, Farah. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you mentioned, that it's a standard question, but how we can adapt, we can mitigate, and every time, like when we go, like it's a kind of developed countries and the developing countries and the negotiations, but I see that where the implementation, whenever it takes the implementation, and it's happened quicker in developed countries than in the developing countries. And I guess Arpit is not here, so we were talking about what should we do, what should we do here when we see that it's an existential threat. So willpower, basic, and more stakeholders, I guess so. And now taking this point to
Because
head,
Indo, we need to, sorry, Indo, to interrupt. I think we need to move away from the nationalist and narratives and arguments, because I think climate change is on a way higher level. And if we remain territorial, if you remain thinking in the old ways of security, we're not going to be able to address it. When the Sundarbans is affected, we have Sundarbans in Bangladesh, we have Sundarbans in India. If the two sides do not discuss, we are the lower riparian. When the glaciers are melting or the Himalayas, in Nepal, we're getting affected, but it comes all the way through India into Bangladesh. So I'm sure there are many parts of India that gets affected as well. So we have to think of it on a region, on a much global, integrated.
Absolutely. It needs it requires a regional cooperation, and I would like to extend this comment to invite Abhinav Pandya, who's from USNES Foundation, who's a co-host here. I guess Abhinav, you and your team has some questions. I guess Preeti has some question. So would you like to go ahead?
My team has some questions. I guess I'll just hand it over to them. Ask the questions. Preeti, please share your questions. Dr. Jan, in case if you have a question, please.
Preeti, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's in the chat box, but I'll read it to you. Yeah. So how do we address the issue of climate migration from the Indo-Pacific islands, considering the UN reports indicating that the small islands in the Indo-Pacific region are at risk of submersion within a few years? So, to anyone who is there?
Okay, we can just quickly, not really, I don't have an answer for this question, because this is something that requires long, discussions, and, so much has already been discussed, but there's not much done on this. So recently we had this instance of Australia and Tuvalu reaching an agreement on how Australia will allow, say, a certain number of Tuvalu citizens to move to Australia, affected by, of course. And yeah, so this would be something of a humanitarian effort in which Australia would facilitate the mobility of a climate affected population from Tuvalu to Australia. But there was a huge problem with that agreement, was that it's signed without much consultation with stakeholders in Tuvalu. Like, what do Tuvaluans really want? One of the biggest challenges is that many of these discussions are happening right now at negotiations and summits between prime ministers, ministers, and others. And I think there is especially in a country like Tuvalu, as far as I know, based on it's most of the decision making is based on a consultative process. And when you have this big decision made without really consulting the people, that actually makes the whole agreement not so effective. The other part is, within the agreement also mentions that in return, Tuvalu should Tuvalu should also inform Australia if they are trying, if they want to enter into any sort of partnerships or security arrangements with other countries. Now, that also questions the sovereignty of Tuvalu, and which kind of, it brings back a lot of colonial mentality and so much more, which is highly problematic in today's world. Talk about justice, when we're talking about justice to ensure that climate migrants are not affected by various socio-political and other sort of economic challenges. So that's another major concern. So after all that agreement that happened, again, after discussion within Tuvalu, it was also suggested we should rescind this agreement and rediscuss it, because this is something that directly questions the sovereignty of Tuvalu itself. So so bilaterally, of course, you can reach agreements like this, but it may also end up, like the way this particular agreement has ended up in. Internationally, within the UN, and there are some mechanisms like Global Compact, and International Migration Organization is also discussing climate-related issues in a big way. Some of these issues are coming up in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change as well. But still, we don't have these legal and other parameters that we have set up to understand and help, people, internally displaced peoples is, of course, something that, countries and governments within the countries have to really, have to bring up policies. India has introduced some policies, like in the state of Odisha. Bangladesh, I know, has also, introduced some policies to help people displaced by these kind of disasters. But when it's transboundary, like, island nations, I think there's another question I saw in the chat box about, transboundary migration is something that involves a lot of legal, political, security, and many other questions, which will have to be sorted out bilaterally, maybe through under the auspices of regional organizations. And, and also the something that involves the communities that are most affected by these challenges. And I think this is where there is a huge challenge, because most people actually don't want to move. They want to stay where they belong, their cultures are, all of that, that's going to be a huge challenge as well. It is not just a political or social issue, it's also a cultural issue and sense of belonging and all of that. So it's a very tricky question, but also it's something, that is being dealt with to some extent, at least nationally and subnationally. I know that some policies have already been put in place by countries in the region.
Thank you so much for the answer. I have
Thank you,
one more
Tanushree.
question. One of my colleague asked, so I'll read it to you guys. How does the military buildup in the South China Sea affect the climate in the region?
Yeah, South China Sea, this is a contested maritime space. And, there are two important island blocks there. One is Spratly and the other is Paracel. And China has taken hold of it, and it is expanding. And it has built up the military garrison over there. They have got airfields. They have got submarines stationed there. Now, China is claiming 90% of the South China Sea. And there are other claimants like Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, and so on and so forth. Now, there's a huge military buildup in the South China Sea. The Americans have almost half of the Pacific fleet, Pacific Command fleet over there. And China has a lot of destroyers, submarines, warships, you name anything, in that part of the world, in the South China Sea. And it extends from the north of Indonesia right up to Vietnam in the north. But it is contested space. There is a problem between China and Philippines. They went to the arbitration. Now there's a problem going on between China and Philippines. There's a war, skirmish is taking place over the Seoul, that island, small island. Now America is coming in, but South China Sea will be badly affected environmentally because too many military gadgets are operating over here, because some of these small islands are being upgraded by filling extra lands or reclaiming lands. This is going to disturb the nature. This is going to disturb the environment, the biodiversity, and these military gadgets they discharge a lot of oil and and gas and everything, and that is going to destroy the biodiversity and the serenity and the natural habitat of the island. And it will, in the long run, definitely be a big problem for the security, the environmental security of the Indo-Pacific. And then with South China Sea, is linked up the East China Sea. There's a problem between China and Japan, and with that is linked up with the Taiwan Strait between China and Taiwan. So they are all linked up. From Malacca Strait, you go up to Taiwan. This entire thing is contested, disturbed, and militarily important areas. And a lot of military gadgets are operating there, including air, army, navy, American forces, and so on and so forth, Chinese forces. If the war breaks out somehow in Taiwan or over South China Sea, it's going to be hell. It's going to be hell. I can foresee that it's a big problem for the environment, for the blue economy, for the green economy, whatever you call it. It will be polluted, and so on and so forth. The fisheries will be disturbed. Chinese are overfishing in near the Filipino Sea, and Philippines cannot do much about it. Can't do much about it.
Thanks, Dr.
Chinese are digging their oil rigs in near Vietnam. Vietnam can't do much about it.
Thanks, Dr.
Chinese
Karim.
are very powerful force coming up. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Karim. And we have we will take the question. Please, your short comments from the speakers on the question on Admiral Awal, and we have Reddy, Rana Pratap Reddy. Please go ahead. Just briefly.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. Hello, ma'am. Hi, this is Rana. So I'm a first-year graduate professional at Duke University, and I'm a research intern with USNA's Foundation. I wanted to gain more clarity on COP28 stock trade, like which they do tend to signal it as a stock take is one of the most successful COP28 achievement is what they say. So I wanted to understand from an Indo-Pacific point of view, how does it impact our countries? And do we see it as a success? Because even in COP27 and all, there's a lot of things that had come out, but very little work has been done. This is more of a tracker, but would that be a chip where we can say that we need more?
Dr. Dhanashree, would you like to comment on this?
Sorry, is the question about global stocktake?
Yeah. And
yeah, okay.
Do we see it as a success or not?
Depends on where you are. So reaching a consensus on such a huge process in itself was difficult, with so many differences already between the, especially developing countries have already had huge amount of difference about mitigation commitments, finance commitments, what I think Farah mentioned about $100 billion loss and damage fund not getting enough fund was something that was raised during the stock take. And also forgetting what happened before 2020 is something that is a huge question mark. So when you're taking stock take, which essentially is about for 5 years kind of stock take, and in that 5 years, then you're expected to ratchet up your ambition on climate action, ratchet up. It doesn't say much about how much of that will be also about finance. You may ratchet up ambition in terms of mitigation commitments, but what about finance? How much of that finance is going to be loans and grants? I mean, and how much of that finance is going to be additional finance? Because right now, a lot of this finance is also being channelized as development assistance or development cooperation with some climate element. So then the question is, is there any additional finance coming? So the stock take in that sense has a lot of loopholes, which is something developing countries did emphasize that this is a major problem. And if you also look at climate action tracker, any of that, we can see that the majority of countries are still not doing enough when it comes to their mitigation commitments, particularly the global north countries who are expected to do more as far as their emissions reduction commitments are concerned. The other part is also when we are talking about stock take and everything, there is also this equitable, nature of stock take. So this is something that, again, developing countries raised, is the modeling, or especially mitigation models that we are looking at. How much of those models actually have equity embedded in them? Or is it just that, models are just about all countries trying to reach certain targets at the same time with similar measures? That is not going to happen, especially when you have these differentiated vulnerabilities, differentiated capacity and all of that. So stock take, of course, reaching a consensus would not be very easy. And also there are still many differences. I would not deny that. Still it's a process. It's a multilateral process, which you can expect it to be very slow. It's not something that can happen overnight. Yeah.
Thanks, Dhanashree. We have the last question.
One thing.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
and one thing that is accepted now is that we are all off track when it comes to the Paris Agreement. So if you are making a reference to the Paris Agreement and the commitments, all countries are off from there. Especially the global north. So that is, as Dhanashree said, the climate finance, the commitments around it, the institutions, the shift and the transition remains a very far target. But the good thing is that it's on the agenda. It's being discussed. There's been a movement around it. You're getting some traction there. National level, there are commitments coming up. People are working on it. The other concern is the private sector. We are up against the fossil fuel industry, the petroleum industry, countries whose economy is based on that. How we're going to make those shifts is still not very, it's not working the way we had hoped 15 years ago or 10 years ago.
So we are also running out of the time. So we will take the Admiral Awal question. Admiral, please go ahead. Take the short comment from the speakers.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Now, a very absorbing discussion by all the speakers, but the time is very short. I will ask Mr. Chaturbedi. You have come up with a very good point, because as nothing is happening, so let something happen. You rightly said that it is all prescriptive. Nothing is working. Philosophical approach. Maybe these are all preaching with no practical impact. But the solution that you have given, that again, adaptation. For Global South, how to adapt? You need fund. And that is to be funded as per the Paris Agreement. This adaptation has to be funded. Innovation, again, you can incubate many ideas. But how to innovate, how to implement it? You need the fund. Then again, the regulating our industries. So we are in the Global South, is a lawyer, a riparian. Doing something is okay, but to me it appears that are you giving a walkabout to the big polluters? Because unless there is a change in their consumption and use of fossil fuel. For example, Bangladesh. contributes very less. Today, if we stop all emissions, everything, nothing is going to happen to the world environment. Only Bangladesh will sink. So this is the enormity of the problem. So I hope you're not giving a walkover, because we need that fund. Whatever you have suggested, for that you need fund. And one of the speakers has mentioned that how long we can adapt. So this is one part. Please clarify that no, we have to fight against those big giants who are polluting. And in the name of COP, I think it is last COP28, there were some 80,000 participants. I mean, it has become a COP tourism. The question is being raised that the very venue is becoming another environmental hazard. Why so many people have to be there to making statements which have no effect at all? So please, your point on that. And I would like to thank the speaker, Ms. Dhanushree Jairam. Madam, you have done a very good job. In all the deliberation, whenever we used to refer the climate change as a security threat or a non-traditional threat, there was to be rejection. No, what is it? What can, already it has expanded so much security definition, and how climate change can become a security threat. But now it has been adopted, but now we have put on another premium. The climate change is not only the security threat, it is the prime mover. It affects all security, traditional, non-traditional, even the economic development. It's a good point. Thank you, congratulations. Thank you very much.
Can I just refer to the earlier question? I'll just give one data. That's it. Nothing more than that.
Sure.
In today's newspaper, the news item that says that the annual adaptation demand was US dollar 215 to 387 billion US dollar from 2015, and the fund has so far allocated only $6 billion. So that's a very, very depressing news for all of us who are asking for more fund. That's it. I just wanted to reinforce the earlier question, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we already passed 10, that what we discussed for 1 hour, but it's 1 hour and 30 minutes, and hopefully we will invite another discussion sooner. So I would like to thank with the USNAS Foundation, Abhinav, you want to say something, and should we wrap it up?
I'd like to have the reaction from Mr. Chaturvedi, if you could.
I guess he
say
is
a
not
few
here,
words.
sir.
I think he left.
Oh, it's...
Thank you very much, Indu. Definitely, it was a very insightful and an eye-opening discussion. And I guess, I mean, mostly we are always focusing too much on security and geopolitical issues that we lose sight of the more burning issues like the climate change and the climate security issues. And definitely, personally for me, because I come from the background in pure geopolitics and security areas, this has been a great learning. And I look forward to more of such engaging and meaningful conversations in the future. And definitely, if we can prepare some kind of a policy draft or policy recommendations based on our webinars on climate change and submit it to the relevant authorities, it will be much more meaningful. I would like to thank the consortium of Indo-Pacific researchers for partnering with us for this event. And my heartfelt thanks to all the speakers who joined us today and shared their insightful thoughts on this critical subject, and also the participants and the teams of USNAS Foundation and consortium of Indo-Pacific researchers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abhinav. Thanks, Farah. Thanks, Dhanushree. Thanks, Susan. Thank you, Dr. Karim. And thank you, participants,
Thank you, Dr.
audience.
Great, excellent. It went very fine. Thank you, everybody.
A wonderful presentation. Thank you all. Have a great day.